Her son found the back door no one saw. The billionaire CEO watched his 18-year-old close a $700 million leak live. His fingers fly across the keyboard with practiced precision while the world's most powerful cybersecurity experts watch in stunned silence. The billionaire CEO steps closer, his brow furrowed. That's impossible. How can you see what my entire team missed? The teenager doesn't look up from his screen. Because I grew up fixing the version my mom built. Their eyes meet for the first time, same intensity, same focus, same genetic code. In that moment, Emerson Vale realizes he's not just watching a brilliant hacker save his company. He's watching his son. "Who are you?" he whispers, as the cameras broadcast their exchange to millions worldwide. "I'm Arlo Monroe." 19 years earlier, the world didn't know Emerson Vale's name. He was just a brilliant cybersecurity researcher with dark circles under his eyes and a dangerous gift. He could see vulnerabilities no one else could. The white noise lab at Digital Fortress was his second home, a windowless room filled with humming servers and the soft blue glow of monitors. It was 3 a.m. when Riley Monroe first walked in, carrying 2 energy drinks and a laptop covered in stickers from hacking conferences. "You're still here?" she asked, setting one of the drinks beside him. Emerson looked up, momentarily disoriented after hours of staring at code. "There's a vulnerability in the new firewall. I can feel it, but I can't find it." Riley pulled up a chair. "Mind if I take a look?" He hesitated. Emerson wasn't used to sharing his work, especially with someone new. Riley had only been at Digital Fortress for 3 weeks as a junior penetration tester. But there was something about her, a quiet confidence, an intensity that matched his own. "Sure," he finally said, sliding his laptop toward her. For the next hour, they worked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clicking of keys and the occasional sigh of frustration. Then Riley pointed to a section of code. "There," she said simply. "That's your weak point." Emerson stared at the screen, then at her. She was right. The vulnerability was subtle, a tiny gap in the authentication protocol that most people would never notice. But she had found it immediately. "How did you see that?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Riley shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "Same way you do, I imagine. I don't just read code, I feel it. The weak spots have a different texture." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, a connection that went beyond professional respect. They were the same kind of different. Over the next few months, they fell into a rhythm. Late nights in the lab, take-out dinners at their desks, conversations that flowed from encryption protocols to philosophy and back again. They kept their growing closeness private. Office relationships were frowned upon, especially between a rising star like Emerson and a new hire. But in the quiet hours when the rest of the team had gone home, when it was just the two of them surrounded by lines of code and the soft hum of servers, their connection felt inevitable. "Do you ever think about what you want to build?" Riley asked one night as they sat on the floor of the lab, sharing a pizza. "Not just securing other people's systems, but creating something of your own." Emerson leaned back against a server rack, considering. "I want to build something unbreakable. A security system so perfect that even people like us couldn't crack it." "Is that possible?" she asked. "Probably not," he admitted. "But that's what makes it worth trying." Riley smiled, reaching for his hand. "Then we should try together." That night, they crossed the line from colleagues to something more. Their first kiss tasted like coffee and possibility, electric and inevitable all at once. For 6 months, they lived in a bubble of their own making, working side by side during the day, careful to maintain professional distance, then falling into each other's arms at night. They wrote code together, dreaming up security protocols that could change the industry. Riley's approach complemented Emerson's perfectly. Where he saw patterns, she saw exceptions. Where he built walls, she found the hidden doors that needed closing. Then came the breakthrough. A security protocol they developed together, though officially credited only to Emerson, caught the attention of the industry. It was elegant, innovative, nearly impenetrable. The kind of work that made careers. The morning after the protocol was published, Emerson was called into a meeting with the board of directors. Riley squeezed his hand under the conference table before he left. "This is it," she whispered. "Everything we've worked for." The meeting lasted 3 hours. When Emerson finally emerged, his face was unreadable. "They offered me CEO," he said when they were alone in the lab that night. "They're spinning off a new company based on our protocol. Valkyrie Systems." Riley's face lit up. "Emerson, that's amazing. We did it." But he didn't smile back. "There's a condition." "What kind of condition?" "No attachments. No liabilities." His voice was flat, rehearsed. "They need a leader, not a lover." Those were their exact words. Riley stepped back, the excitement draining from her face. "What are you saying?" "They know about us, Riley. Someone talked. And they made it clear, if I want this position, I can't have distractions." "Distractions?" The word hung between them, sharp and painful. "Is that what I am to you?" Emerson couldn't meet her eyes. "This is everything I've worked for. Everything we've worked for. The protocol will change the industry, but only if it has the right backing, the right leadership. And that leadership can't include me." Riley's voice was quiet now, dangerous. "They were very specific. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, but I have to be all in. No divided loyalties." Riley stared at him, waiting for him to say more, to fight for them, to suggest an alternative. But he remained silent, his decision already made. "I see," she finally said. "Well, congratulations, CEO Vale. I hope it's worth it." She walked out of the lab, expecting him to follow, to stop her. He didn't. The next day, Emerson Vale cleaned out his desk and moved to the executive floor. Riley requested a transfer to a different department. They never spoke again. What Emerson didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Riley carried more than heartbreak when she walked away. She carried his child. A son who would inherit his father's brilliant mind and his mother's stubborn heart. A son who would one day save the empire his father built, using the very skills his mother had taught him. Riley Monroe discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks after Emerson walked out of her life. Sitting alone in her apartment bathroom, staring at the positive test, she made a decision: she would raise this child on her own terms, with all the love and strength she possessed. She never considered telling Emerson. He had made his choice clear: career over connection, ambition over attachment. She wouldn't force him into fatherhood when he had so clearly chosen another path. "It's just you and me, little one," she whispered, hand on her still flat stomach. "And we're going to be extraordinary together." Arlo Monroe was born on a rainy April morning, a quiet baby with intense eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. From the beginning, Riley could see Emerson in him, the same thoughtful gaze, the same focused attention, the same innate curiosity about how things worked. As Arlo grew, his brilliance became impossible to ignore. At 4, he was asking questions about computer systems that Riley struggled to answer in terms he could understand. By 5, he was sitting beside her as she worked, watching her code with a concentration that seemed impossible for a child his age. "Mommy, why does that part go there?" he would ask, pointing to sections of her code. "Because it needs to connect to this other part," she would explain, amazed at how quickly he grasped concepts that took most adults years to understand. By the time Arlo was 7, he was writing simple programs of his own. Riley had transitioned from Digital Fortress to freelance security consulting, allowing her to work from home and homeschool Arlo. His intelligence was so far beyond his peers that traditional schooling would have been more frustrating than helpful. "Mom, I made something," Arlo announced one day, his small face serious as he turned his laptop toward her. "It's a game, but it's also a puzzle." Riley watched in amazement as he demonstrated a simple but elegant encryption game he had created, one that taught basic cybersecurity concepts through play. It was the kind of educational tool that companies paid thousands to develop. "Arlo, this is incredible," she said, genuinely impressed. "How did you come up with this?" He shrugged, as if it were obvious. "I just thought about how I would want to learn it." As Arlo grew older, his skills only sharpened. At 12, he wrote a script to help his online gaming community manage their server, but accidentally took down the municipal website that shared the same hosting service. Horrified by his mistake, he immediately called the city IT department, confessed, and offered to fix it. "Mom, I messed up," he told Riley, his face pale. "I didn't mean to, but I broke something important." Instead of punishing him, Riley sat beside him as he worked to restore the website, guiding him through the proper protocols for testing code in isolated environments. The city IT director was so impressed with Arlo's fix that he offered him an internship, which Riley politely declined, explaining that her son was still in middle school. At 15, Arlo built a personal firewall so sophisticated that it caught the attention of two cybersecurity firms who tried to recruit the anonymous developer, not realizing they were attempting to hire a teenager. Through it all, Riley protected him fiercely. She kept him out of the spotlight, encouraged his talents while ensuring he developed empathy and ethics alongside his technical skills. She taught him that with great ability came great responsibility, that the power to see vulnerabilities carried an obligation to protect, not exploit. Occasionally, Arlo would ask about his father. The questions began simply when he was young. "Do I have a daddy?" "Yes," Riley would answer honestly. "But he's not part of our lives." As Arlo grew older, his questions became more specific. "Is my father dead?" "No, he's alive." "Does he know about me?" "No, he doesn't." "Why didn't you tell him?" These were the hardest questions to answer. Riley never lied to her son, but she carefully measured her responses, determined not to burden him with adult complexities or turn him against a father he had never met. "Your father made a choice before he knew about you," she explained when Arlo was 14 and pressing for more details. "He chose his career over relationships. I respected his choice by not forcing him into a responsibility he wasn't ready for." "Do I look like him?" Arlo asked. Riley smiled sadly. "Yes. Especially when you're concentrating on a difficult problem. You get the same little crease between your eyebrows." What Riley never told Arlo was his father's name or the specifics of his work. She didn't mention that Emerson Vale had gone on to build Valkyrie Systems into the world's leading cybersecurity firm. She didn't tell him that the security protocols she taught him were often designed to counter the very systems his father had created. But as Arlo grew older and more connected to the tech world, it became harder to keep these secrets. Emerson Vale was everywhere, his face on technology magazines, his name in industry news, his systems protecting everything from banking networks to national infrastructure. By 18, Arlo had pieced together enough clues to suspect the truth, though he never confronted his mother directly. He noticed how she would change the channel when Emerson appeared on tech news. How she would go quiet when Valkyrie Systems was mentioned in conversation. How some of her oldest code bore striking similarities to Valkyrie's foundational protocols. Arlo grew up feeling like half of his story lived in the shadows, a mystery he was determined to solve, when the time was right. That time would come sooner than anyone expected, when a security breach threatened not just Valkyrie Systems, but the global financial infrastructure it was built to protect. Hey everyone, this is Mr. Ellington Lovelines. If you're enjoying this story of hidden connections and technological intrigue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Your support helps us bring more compelling stories like this one to life. Emerson Vale stood at the window of his corner office, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. At 45, he had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of and more. Valkyrie Systems had grown from a promising startup to the backbone of global financial security. His encryption protocols protected governments, banks, and stock markets worldwide. His net worth had 11 zeros. His face had graced the cover of every major tech and business publication. And yet, something was missing. Something he couldn't quite name. Mr. Vale. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. The emergency board meeting is starting in 5 minutes. I'll be right there, he replied, straightening his tie. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. 15 faces looked to him with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed panic. The chief security officer, Matthew Reeves, stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence notably absent. "Give me the update," Emerson said, taking his seat. Matthew cleared his throat. "It's worse than we initially thought. The leak has accelerated. We're now looking at approximately $700 million in compromised transactions over the past 72 hours. A murmur ran through the room. Emerson remained outwardly calm, though his mind was racing. For 3 days, Valkyrie had been battling an unprecedented security breach. One that somehow bypassed their most sophisticated defenses and was systematically draining funds from client accounts worldwide. "Do we know the entry point yet?" Emerson asked. Matthew shook his head. "That's what's so baffling. There's no evidence of external penetration. No malware signatures. No brute force attempts. It's as if the system is bleeding from within." "That's impossible," Emerson said flatly. "Our internal architecture is compartmentalized specifically to prevent this kind of cascading failure." "I know," Matthew agreed. "But the evidence suggests otherwise. Transactions are being rerouted. Digital signatures rewritten. Money is literally evaporating into digital air." The CFO spoke up, her voice tight with stress. "The financial impact is just the beginning. Our stock has dropped 18% since news of the breach leaked to the press. Clients are threatening to pull out. Regulators from 3 countries have opened investigations." "And the public response?" Emerson asked, though he already knew the answer. The head of communications grimaced. "It's a bloodbath. Social media is calling it the Valkyrie collapse. Financial news networks are running 24/7 coverage. The prevailing theory is that we've been compromised by state-sponsored hackers." Emerson absorbed this information, his expression betraying nothing of the turmoil he felt. Valkyrie Systems was built on trust. Their entire business model depended on being the most secure, most reliable security provider in the world. This breach wasn't just a financial disaster, it was an existential threat. "What are our options?" he asked. Matthew hesitated. "We've deployed every countermeasure in our arsenal. Nothing has worked. We've brought in 3 independent security firms to assist. They're equally stumped. There's one more thing," the head of legal interjected. "The Federal Cybersecurity Commission is demanding transparency. They want us to conduct our investigation publicly." "Publicly?" Emerson's voice was incredulous. "They want us to broadcast our vulnerabilities to the world. They're concerned about systemic risk," legal explained. "Valkyrie protects 60% of the world's financial transactions. This isn't just our problem anymore, it's a potential global crisis." Emerson stood, pacing the length of the boardroom. Everything he had built over the past 19 years was at risk. The company. The technology. His legacy. "Fine," he finally said. "If they want transparency, we'll give them transparency. But we do it on our terms." He turned to his team, decision made. "We'll host a security summit. Invite the best ethical hackers in the world. Let them try to find and fix the leak, live, with the world watching." "That's incredibly risky," Matthew warned. "What if no one can solve it? What if it exposes even more vulnerabilities?" Emerson's expression hardened. What choice do we have? If we can't fix this ourselves, maybe someone else can. And if they do it publicly, it restores some measure of trust. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Valkyrie Systems, the company that had built its reputation on being unhackable, was about to invite the world to witness its vulnerability. Set it up, Emerson ordered. A global security summit. Live streamed. Open applications to ethical hackers worldwide. Offer a substantial reward for whoever finds and fixes the leak. How substantial? The CFO asked. $10 million, Emerson said without hesitation. And a guaranteed position at Valkyrie. As the meeting adjourned and his team scattered to implement his directives, Emerson remained in the boardroom alone. He pulled up the latest data on the breach, studying the patterns of the leak. There was something familiar about it. Something that tugged at the edges of his memory. But he couldn't quite place it. For the first time in his career, Emerson Vale faced a problem he couldn't solve. A vulnerability he couldn't see. And the clock was ticking. Riley Monroe was in the middle of a security consultation when her phone began buzzing incessantly. She ignored it at first, focused on explaining a vulnerability assessment to her client. But when it continued, she excused herself to check the messages. Her screen was filled with notifications, all linking to the same announcement: Valkyrie Systems launches global hackathon to address unprecedented security breach. Riley's heart sank as she read the details. Valkyrie, Emerson's company, was experiencing a catastrophic security failure. Money disappearing. Systems compromised. And now they were inviting hackers from around the world to help fix it, live on global broadcasts. She immediately thought of Arlo. Her son, who had inherited his father's gift for seeing vulnerabilities. Her son, who had grown up curious about the father he'd never met. Her son, who was now 18 and making his own decisions. When she arrived home that evening, Arlo was already at his computer, reading about the Valkyrie challenge. "Have you seen this?" he asked without looking up. "I have," Riley said carefully, setting down her bag. "Quite a situation they've got themselves in." Arlo turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "I could solve this." Riley felt a chill run through her. "Arlo. I'm serious, Mom. Based on what they've released about the breach, it sounds like an architectural issue, not an attack. The kind of thing that happens when old code interacts with new systems in unexpected ways. There are thousands of brilliant security experts working on this," Riley countered. "Let them handle it." Arlo's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why don't you want me involved? Is it because it's Valkyrie Systems? Or is it because of him?" The question hung in the air between them. In 18 years, Riley had never confirmed her suspicions about who his father was, but Arlo was too smart not to have figured it out. "This isn't about Emerson Vale," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Isn't it?" Arlo challenged. "You tense up every time his name appears in the news. You've never worked with Valkyrie, despite them being the biggest name in the industry. And I've seen your old code, Mom. The foundational protocols you wrote 18 years ago. They're remarkably similar to Valkyrie's core architecture." Riley sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "When did you figure it out?" "I've suspected for years," Arlo admitted. "But I wasn't certain until now. The timing fits. The technical similarities. The way you avoid talking about him." He paused. "He's my father, isn't he?" Riley nodded slowly. "Yes. Emerson Vale is your father." Arlo absorbed this confirmation, his expression unreadable. "Does he know about me?" "No," Riley said softly. "He left before I knew I was pregnant. He made his choice, his career, his ambitions. I made mine, you." Arlo was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then he turned back to his computer, pulling up the application for the Valkyrie hackathon. "Arlo, please," Riley said, realizing his intention. "This isn't the way to meet him." "This isn't about meeting him," Arlo insisted, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "This is about solving a fascinating technical problem. One that I'm uniquely qualified to address." "Because you're his son?" "Because I'm your son," Arlo corrected. "Because I grew up learning from you, understanding how systems connect, how vulnerabilities form, how to see what others miss." Riley wanted to argue further, but she recognized the determination in Arlo's eyes. It was the same expression she'd seen in Emerson's eyes 19 years ago. The unwavering focus of someone who had found a problem they needed to solve. "If you do this," she said finally, "you do it anonymously. No connection to me, no mention of relationships. Promise me." Arlo nodded. "I promise. This is just about the code." But as he completed the application, using only his first name and submitting it through an anonymous server, they both knew it was about much more than code. It was about answers. About connections. About the other half of Arlo's story that had lived in shadows for 18 years. The next morning, Riley woke to find Arlo already at his computer, surrounded by notes and diagrams. He had been up all night, analyzing the limited information Valkyrie had released about the breach. "I think I know what's happening," he said without preamble. "It's not a new vulnerability. It's an old one, something built into the original system architecture that's been dormant until now." Riley felt a chill run through her. She remembered those early days at Digital Fortress, working side by side with Emerson, building the protocols that would eventually become Valkyrie's foundation. There had been temporary backdoors, testing bypasses, things that were supposed to be removed before the final implementation. "Arlo, listen to me," she said urgently. "If what you're saying is true, this could be complicated." "Complicated how?" Riley chose her words carefully. "Before your father and I, before we went our separate ways, we were working on a security protocol together. The early versions had certain bypasses built in, for testing, for emergency access. They were never meant to be part of the final system." Understanding dawned on Arlo's face. "You think one of those bypasses is still there? After all these years?" "It's possible," Riley admitted. "If the core architecture was never completely overhauled, if they just built on top of the original framework. Then there could be a backdoor that no one remembers," Arlo finished. "A vulnerability hidden in plain sight for 18 years. The implications were staggering. If Arlo was right, the leak wasn't the result of a sophisticated attack. It was the consequence of abandoned code that Emerson and Riley had written together, before ambition tore them apart." 3 days later, Arlo received the email. He had been selected as one of 50 ethical hackers invited to the Valkyrie Security Summit. The event would be held in San Francisco, broadcast live to millions worldwide, with regulators and industry experts in attendance. "I got in," he told Riley, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Riley felt her heart sink and swell simultaneously. Proud of her son's abilities, terrified of what might happen when he came face to face with the father who didn't know he existed. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one last time. Arlo nodded, his expression resolute. "I'm sure. It's time. If you're finding this story of hidden connections and technological mysteries compelling, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Ellington Lovelines. Your support helps us continue bringing these emotional journeys to life." The Valkyrie Systems headquarters in San Francisco had been transformed. The vast atrium, usually a showcase of minimalist tech elegance, now resembled a high-stakes command center. Rows of workstations faced a central stage where massive screens displayed real-time data from the compromised systems. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically throughout the space, ready to broadcast every moment of the unprecedented event to a global audience. Emerson Vale stood in his office overlooking the atrium, watching the selected hackers file in. 50 of the world's most brilliant security experts, ranging from corporate consultants to renowned academics to anonymous figures from the darker corners of the internet, all gathered to attempt what his own team had failed to accomplish: find and fix the $700 million leak that threatened to destroy everything he had built. "We're ready to begin, sir," Matthew said from the doorway. The regulators are seated. Press is in position. Live stream goes active in 10 minutes. Emerson nodded, straightening his tie. "Any standouts among the participants?" "A few," Matthew replied, consulting his tablet. "There's a team from MIT, a former NSA specialist, and a couple of anonymous entrants with impressive preliminary analyses. One in particular, goes by just Arlo, submitted an initial hypothesis that our team found intriguing." "Intriguing how?" "He suggested the breach might not be an attack at all, but a legacy vulnerability in the original architecture. Something built into the system from the beginning." Emerson frowned. The idea had crossed his mind, but he had dismissed it. The original Valkyrie protocols had been audited countless times over the years. Any vulnerabilities from the early days should have been identified and patched long ago. Unless a memory surfaced. Riley, 18 years ago, working late in the lab, creating a temporary bypass for testing purposes. "We'll remove it before implementation," she had promised. But then everything had fallen apart. He had taken the CEO position. She had walked away. In the chaos of launching Valkyrie, had that bypass ever been removed? "I want to meet this Arlo," Emerson said suddenly. "After the summit begins." Matthew nodded and left to make final preparations. Emerson remained at the window, his thoughts drifting to the past. To Riley. To the brilliant partnership they had shared before ambition tore them apart. He had looked for her, years later, when the initial success of Valkyrie had settled into something stable. But she had disappeared, changed jobs, moved away, left no digital footprint for him to follow. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, he wondered if he had made the right choice. If the empire he had built was worth the connection he had sacrificed. The summit began with formal introductions and a detailed briefing on the breach. Emerson took the stage, his public persona firmly in place, confident, commanding, in control despite the crisis. "What we're facing is unprecedented," he told the assembled hackers and the millions watching online. "A security failure that defies conventional analysis. For 3 weeks, the best minds at Valkyrie have tried to locate and seal this leak. We've failed. Now we're turning to you, the global security community, for help." He outlined the parameters of the challenge. Participants would have access to sanitized system data, showing the patterns of the breach without exposing client information. They would work independently but in full view of the cameras. The first to identify and fix the vulnerability would receive the promised reward. $10 million and a position at Valkyrie. "This isn't just about saving one company," Emerson concluded. "It's about protecting the global financial infrastructure that depends on our systems. Good luck to all of you." As the hackers took their stations and began working, Emerson moved to a monitoring position on the elevated platform. From here, he could observe all 50 participants while remaining somewhat removed from the camera's constant focus. His attention was immediately drawn to a young man at Station 23. Unlike the others, who had arrived with teams or elaborate equipment, this participant had only a backpack and a laptop covered with stickers from various hacking conferences. He worked with quiet intensity, his movements efficient and focused. "That's him," Matthew said, following Emerson's gaze. "That's Arlo." Emerson studied the young hacker more closely. There was something familiar about him. About the way he held himself, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. Something that stirred a distant memory. "How old is he?" Emerson asked. Matthew consulted his tablet. "Unknown. His application was submitted anonymously. Based on appearance, early 20s maybe." Emerson continued watching as Arlo navigated through the system data with remarkable speed and confidence. Unlike the other participants, who were trying various penetration techniques or searching for malware signatures, Arlo seemed to be digging into the foundational architecture, the original code that Emerson himself had written nearly 2 decades ago. Across town, in a modest hotel room, Riley Monroe sat frozen in front of the television. She had promised Arlo she wouldn't come to the summit, that she would let him do this on his own terms. But she couldn't stay away entirely. So she had flown to San Francisco and checked into a hotel near Valkyrie headquarters, close enough to be there if Arlo needed her, but distant enough to respect his independence. Now she watched, heart in her throat, as her son appeared on screen. The cameras had found him, this focused young man working with quiet determination while chaos unfolded around him. And behind him, on the elevated platform, stood Emerson Vale. The man she had once loved, the father of her child, watching their son without knowing who he was. "Arlo, why?" she whispered to the screen. But she knew why. He was seeking answers. Connections. The missing pieces of his own story. Back at the summit, hours had passed with little progress. Many participants had hit dead ends. Some were pursuing promising leads but nothing conclusive. The pressure in the room was palpable. $700 million continuing to leak, the world watching, reputations on the line. Then Arlo stopped typing. He sat back in his chair, staring at his screen with an expression of dawning realization. Slowly, he raised his hand. A moderator approached. "Have you found something?" Arlo nodded. "I need to speak directly to Mr. Vale. I've identified the source of the leak." The statement sent a ripple through the room. Cameras swiveled toward Station 23. Emerson stepped forward on the platform, signaling for Arlo to be brought to him. As Arlo stood and gathered his laptop, the other participants watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. No one had expected a breakthrough so soon, especially not from one of the anonymous entrants. Arlo climbed the steps to the platform, coming face to face with Emerson Vale for the first time. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other, the billionaire CEO and the young hacker. While millions watched, Emerson felt a strange shiver run through him. The posture. The eyes. The concentration. It was like watching a ghost of his younger self step forward. "You found the source of the breach?" Emerson asked, breaking the silence. Arlo nodded, turning his laptop so Emerson could see the screen. "There's no external attack. The leak is internal." The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief. "That's impossible. No one bypasses our root keys. This kid doesn't know what he's saying." Emerson raised a hand, silencing the room. "Explain," he said to Arlo. Arlo's voice was steady, confident beyond his years. "It's not a hack. It's a leftover bypass. A backdoor from an old beta system." Emerson froze. A beta system, from 18 years ago, designed before he became CEO, designed in the old lab, designed back when he was in love with a woman who wrote code with him under dim fluorescent lights. Arlo continued, his fingers moving across the keyboard to highlight sections of code buried deep in the system architecture. "See these signatures? This pattern? This isn't an intrusion. It's original code, a testing bypass that was never removed. It's been dormant all these years, but recent updates to the transaction processing system accidentally triggered it." Emerson stared at the screen, recognition dawning. The bypass. Riley's bypass. The one they had created together for testing purposes, never meant to be part of the final implementation. "How do you know this architecture?" Emerson asked, his voice barely audible. Arlo didn't look up from his screen. "Because I grew up fixing the version my mom built." The world gasped. Emerson staggered back slightly, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. Riley. It had to be Riley. But the boy, the timing, the face. No. It couldn't be. Arlo continued working, seemingly oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped. This isn't a hack. It's a forgotten doorway. Your system is bleeding because a younger version of you never finished sealing it. The cameras zoomed in on Emerson's face, capturing his shock, his confusion, his dawning realization. But he was a CEO first, had been for 18 years. He compartmentalized his personal turmoil and focused on the crisis at hand. Can you fix it? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Arlo nodded. I can close the back door. But I'll need direct access to the core system, not just this sanitized data. Emerson hesitated only briefly. Protocol dictated that no outside individual should ever access Valkyrie's core architecture. But protocol had failed them. The leak continued. And something in him, something beyond logic or business sense, trusted this young man. Grant him access, Emerson ordered Matthew. Full administrative privileges. Sir, that's against every security measure we have in place, Matthew protested. Do it, Emerson said firmly. Now. As Matthew reluctantly complied, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The other participants watched in stunned silence as this unknown young hacker was given the keys to the kingdom, access that most of them, despite their credentials and reputations, would never be granted. Arlo connected his laptop to the main system, his fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced precision. On the large screens above the stage, the audience could see him navigating through layers of code, diving deeper into the architecture than anyone had gone before. There, he said after several tense minutes. That's the bypass. He highlighted a section of code that looked innocuous to most observers but made Emerson's breath catch. He recognized it immediately. A clever little backdoor that Riley had designed for testing the authentication protocols. It was elegant, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. It was designed to be temporary, Arlo explained, his voice carrying through the now silent room. A way to test the system without going through normal authentication channels. But it was never removed. And recent updates triggered it? Emerson asked, already knowing the answer. Arlo nodded. The new transaction processing system interacts with this old code in a way no one anticipated. Every time a certain type of high-volume transaction occurs, the bypass activates, creating a small leak. Over time, those small leaks have compounded. Can you close it permanently? Emerson asked. Yes, Arlo said confidently. But first I need to recover the funds that have already been diverted. For the next 30 minutes, the world watched as Arlo worked with calm, methodical precision. He traced the path of the diverted funds, created a recovery protocol, and prepared to seal the breach once and for all. I'm ready, he finally announced. Executing final seal. His finger hovered over the enter key for a dramatic moment, whether intentional or not, it made for compelling television. Then he pressed it. The screens flickered, data streams reorganized, and finally, 3 messages appeared. System restored. Leak neutralized. All funds recovered. The room exploded in applause. Regulators nodded in approval. The other participants, though disappointed at losing the competition, couldn't help but admire the elegant solution. On financial news networks, reporters announced that Valkyrie's stock was already rebounding on news that the crisis had been resolved. But Emerson Vale didn't clap. He stared at the young man who had just saved his empire, seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time. The jawline. The hands. The way he leaned forward before hitting enter. These weren't just familiar mannerisms. They were genetic echoes, reflections of himself at that age. He already knew the answer, but he had to ask, "What's your full name?" Arlo closed his laptop, meeting Emerson's gaze directly. Arlo Monroe. Monroe. Riley's surname. The confirmation hit Emerson like a physical blow. How old are you, Arlo? He asked, though he had already done the math. 18, Arlo replied steadily. Born April 12. 18 years. 9 months after Riley had walked out of his life. 9 months after he had chosen ambition over love. The cameras were still rolling, capturing this tense exchange while the world tried to understand its significance. Emerson was acutely aware of the millions watching, of the need to maintain his public persona despite the personal earthquake shaking his foundations. Mr. Vale, a regulator called from below. We need to verify the fix before making any official statements. Emerson nodded, grateful for the interruption. Of course. Matthew, please escort our technical team to review Mr. Monroe's solution. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes for a formal briefing. As the crowd dispersed and the cameras temporarily focused elsewhere, Emerson turned back to Arlo. We need to talk. Privately. Arlo nodded, his expression unreadable. I thought we might. Emerson led Arlo to his private office, away from the cameras and the curious eyes of the summit participants. As the door closed behind them, the carefully maintained facade of the confident CEO began to crack. You're Riley's son, Emerson said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Arlo confirmed. And you're my son. It wasn't a question, but Arlo answered anyway. According to my birth certificate and 18 years of my mother's confirmation, yes. Emerson sank into his chair, the full weight of the revelation hitting him. He had a son. A brilliant, remarkable son who had just saved everything Emerson had built. A son he had never known existed. She never told me, he said, more to himself than to Arlo. Why didn't she tell me? Arlo studied him, his expression measured. Mom said you weren't ready to be anyone's father. The words cut deep because they contained a truth Emerson couldn't deny. 18 years ago, faced with the choice between love and ambition, he had chosen ambition without hesitation. She said to let you have your success. Your world. Your power, Arlo continued, his tone neutral but his words pointed. Emerson's throat closed with emotion. Everything he had built, the company, the technology, the fortune, suddenly felt hollow in the face of what he had unknowingly given up. Did she struggle? He asked, needing to know yet dreading the answer. Financially? Sometimes, Arlo admitted. She turned down corporate jobs that would have paid more because they wouldn't give her the flexibility to raise me properly. But we were never poor. Mom made sure I had everything I needed. And emotionally? Was she happy? Arlo's expression softened slightly. She built a good life. Focused on me, on her work, on making a difference in her own way. She never spoke badly of you, if that's what you're asking. Emerson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, the visible manifestation of his success. For 18 years, he had measured his worth by his achievements, his innovations, his wealth. Now, in the space of an hour, those metrics had been rendered meaningless. Why now? He finally asked, turning back to Arlo. Why come forward like this? I didn't come here to reveal my identity, Arlo said. I came to solve an interesting technical problem. One that I was uniquely qualified to address because I grew up learning from the person who helped build the original system. But you must have known we would meet. That I would recognize something. Arlo shrugged. I suspected. But that wasn't my primary motivation. Then what was? Curiosity, Arlo admitted. I've spent my life wondering about you. Not just as my absent father, but as the architect of systems that changed the world. I wanted to see if the reality matched the legend. And does it? Emerson asked, suddenly vulnerable in a way he hadn't been in decades. Arlo considered the question. The technical brilliance? Yes. The rest? I don't know you well enough to say. The simple honesty of the statement struck Emerson deeply. This young man, his son, saw him clearly, without the distortion of either hero worship or resentment. It was refreshing and terrifying all at once. "I want to know you, Arlo," Emerson said, the words coming from somewhere deep and genuine. "I've missed 18 years. I don't want to miss any more." "That's not entirely up to you," Arlo replied. "Mom has a say in this too." "Riley," Emerson breathed her name. Is she here?" "Not at the summit. But she's in San Francisco. She wanted to be nearby, just in case." Emerson felt a surge of emotion. Knowing Riley was close, that she had come despite everything that had happened between them. "I need to see her. To talk to her." "I'll tell her," Arlo said. "But it's her choice." "Of course," Emerson agreed quickly. "Always her choice." A knock at the door interrupted them. Matthew entered, looking between Emerson and Arlo with barely concealed curiosity. "Sir, the technical team has verified the fix. The system is secure. All diverted funds have been recovered. The press is waiting for a statement." Emerson nodded. "Thank you, Matthew. We'll be right out." As Matthew left, Emerson turned back to Arlo. "I have to address the media. Will you stay? Afterward, we could talk more. I could arrange for Riley to join us, if she's willing." Arlo considered the offer. "I'll stay for now. As for Mom, like I said, I'll ask her." They returned to the atrium, where the cameras immediately focused on them. Emerson stepped to the podium, the consummate professional despite the personal earthquake he had just experienced. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to confirm that the security vulnerability has been identified and permanently resolved. All affected funds have been recovered. Valkyrie Systems is once again secure." He paused, then continued with something uncharacteristically personal. "Today's events have reminded us of an important truth: no system is perfect. No security is absolute. We build, we learn, we improve. That is the cycle of innovation." His eyes found Arlo in the crowd. "I want to personally thank Arlo Monroe, whose exceptional insight and skill brought this crisis to an end. Mr. Monroe identified what my entire team missed, a legacy vulnerability in our original architecture. His solution was elegant, comprehensive, and effective." The press immediately began shouting questions. "Mr. Vale, will Mr. Monroe be joining Valkyrie? Is it true he's only 18 years old? How did he see what your entire security team missed?" Emerson raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Monroe has earned the promised reward, $10 million and a position at Valkyrie, should he choose to accept it. As for his methods and background, I'll let him address those questions himself, if he wishes." He stepped back from the podium, gesturing for Arlo to take his place. Arlo hesitated, then moved forward, facing the world's media with remarkable composure for someone his age. "I found the vulnerability because I approached the system differently," he explained simply. "Sometimes the most dangerous weaknesses aren't new intrusions but old shortcuts that were never properly closed." A reporter called out, "Mr. Monroe, you mentioned your mother helped build the original system. Was she a Valkyrie employee?" Arlo glanced at Emerson, a silent question in his eyes. Emerson gave a small nod, permission to share as much or as little as Arlo felt comfortable revealing. "My mother worked with Mr. Vale before Valkyrie Systems existed," Arlo said carefully. "She helped develop some of the original security protocols that later became part of Valkyrie's foundation." "And who is your mother?" another reporter pressed. "That's not relevant to today's events," Arlo replied firmly. "What matters is that the vulnerability has been fixed and the system is secure." His poise under pressure impressed Emerson. This young man, his son, handled the media with a natural confidence that Emerson himself had taken years to develop. As the press conference concluded and the summit began to wind down, Emerson found himself in the strange position of being a guest in his own life. Watching as Arlo fielded technical questions from regulators, exchanged contact information with impressed security experts, and generally navigated the aftermath of his sudden fame with remarkable grace. "He's extraordinary," Matthew commented, joining Emerson at the edge of the room. "Hard to believe he's only 18. "Yes," Emerson agreed softly. "Extraordinary." "The board is ecstatic, by the way," Matthew continued. "Stock is up 12% already. Client confidence is returning. The crisis appears to be over." But Emerson barely heard him. His attention was fixed on Arlo, who was checking his phone with sudden intensity. The young man looked up, caught Emerson's eye, and gave a small nod before walking over. "My mom is here," Arlo said quietly. "She's waiting outside. She'd like to see you." Emerson's heart raced. After 18 years, Riley was just outside. The woman he had walked away from, the mother of his child, the co-creator of the very systems that had made him a billionaire. "Lead the way," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. If you've been moved by this story of hidden connections and unexpected reunions, please take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Lovelines. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind us how our past choices shape our present and how it's never too late to reconnect with what truly matters. Arlo led Emerson through a side exit, away from the cameras and curious onlookers. They emerged into a small courtyard, sheltered from the street by high walls and carefully manicured greenery, a private oasis in the midst of downtown San Francisco. And there she was. Riley Monroe stood by a small fountain, her back to them as they approached. She wore simple jeans and a blue blouse, her hair shorter than Emerson remembered but still curling slightly at the ends. At the sound of their footsteps, she turned. 18 years had changed her, of course. There were fine lines around her eyes now, a maturity to her features that hadn't been there before. But her eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, seeing everything. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply looked at each other, the woman who had walked away, the man who had let her go, and the son who connected them despite everything. "Riley," Emerson finally said, her name feeling both foreign and familiar on his lips. "Emerson," she replied, her voice steady. "It's been a long time. 19 years, 4 months, and approximately 16 days, he said without thinking. "But who's counting?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Still precise as ever." Arlo looked between them, then cleared his throat. "I'm going to give you two some privacy. I'll be inside if you need me." As he walked away, Riley called after him, "Arlo. You were brilliant today. I'm proud of you." The simple praise, delivered with such genuine warmth, made Emerson's chest ache. How many moments like this had he missed? How many achievements had gone uncelebrated by a father who didn't know he existed? When they were alone, an awkward silence fell between them. There was too much to say, too many years to bridge, too many emotions swirling beneath the surface. "You raised an extraordinary young man," Emerson finally said. "Yes," Riley agreed. "I did." The simplicity of her response, the absence of any invitation for him to claim credit, was a gentle but firm reminder of his absence. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, the question that had been burning inside him since the moment he realized Arlo was his son. Riley considered him thoughtfully. "Would it have mattered? Would you have chosen differently?" "I don't know," he admitted, the truth painful but necessary. "Back then, I was driven. Ambitious." "Exactly," she said. "You made your choice, Emerson. You chose Valkyrie over us. I respected that choice by not forcing a responsibility on you that you clearly weren't ready for." "But he's my son," Emerson protested. "I had a right to know." "And he had a right to a father who wanted to be there," Riley countered, her voice still calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. "Not one who saw him as an obligation or an inconvenience to his career trajectory." Emerson had no answer for that. She was right, as she so often had been. For what it's worth, he said quietly, walking away from you is the biggest regret of my life. Riley's expression softened slightly. Is it? Or are you just saying that because you've discovered what you missed? The question struck at the heart of his carefully constructed life. Had he truly regretted losing Riley all these years? Or was he simply confronting the consequences of his choices now that they were unavoidable? Both, he finally admitted. I've thought about you over the years, wondered where you were, what you were doing. But I convinced myself that the choice I made was necessary. That the success justified the sacrifice. He gestured vaguely toward the Valkyrie building behind them. I built all of this, became everything my ambition demanded, and still, something was missing. And now you know what it was, Riley said softly. Yes, Emerson agreed. Now I know. They stood in silence for a moment, the years between them both a chasm and a bridge. So much had changed, yet in some ways, they were still the same people who had worked side by side in that dim lab all those years ago. What happens now? Emerson finally asked. Riley looked toward the building where their son had disappeared. That depends on what you want, Emerson. And on what Arlo wants. I want to know my son, he said without hesitation. I've missed 18 years. I don't want to miss any more. And what about Valkyrie? Your board? Your shareholders? Will they make room in your life for a family you never acknowledged? The question wasn't accusatory, merely practical. Riley had always been pragmatic, seeing the world as it was rather than how she wished it to be. They'll have to, Emerson said firmly. Or I'll make room myself. Riley studied him, searching for sincerity. The Emerson Vale I knew would never have said that. He would have found a logical compromise, a way to have both without sacrificing either. I'm not that man anymore, Emerson said quietly. Or maybe I am, but I've learned something he hadn't yet. That some things can't be compromised on. Some choices are binary. A small smile touched Riley's lips. Now that sounds like something I would have said. You probably did, Emerson admitted. I just wasn't ready to hear it then. The tension between them eased slightly, the conversation shifting from accusation and defense to something more thoughtful, more measured. Arlo is 18, Riley said. Legally an adult. He can make his own decisions about what relationship he wants with you. And you? Emerson asked, the question hanging between them. What relationship do you want with me? Riley took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. I don't know, Emerson. I've spent almost 19 years building a life that doesn't include you. I'm not the same woman who loved you in that lab. And you're certainly not the same man. No, he agreed. We're not those people anymore. But maybe. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we can get to know who we are now. Riley didn't immediately reject the idea, which Emerson counted as progress. One step at a time, she said. Right now, Arlo is what matters. He's curious about you, has been his whole life. He deserves the chance to know his father. Thank you, Emerson said, genuinely grateful. For giving me that chance. For raising him to be the remarkable person he is. For everything, Riley. She nodded, acknowledging his gratitude without dismissing it. We should go find him. He's probably wondering if we've killed each other by now. As they walked back toward the building, Emerson hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. The back door in the system, did you know it was still there? Riley shook her head. No. We designed it together, but it was supposed to be temporary. When we parted ways, I assumed you'd removed it before the final implementation. And I assumed you had, Emerson said ruefully. Another consequence of our failure to communicate. A $700 million consequence, Riley pointed out, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. Worth every penny, Emerson said softly, if it brought you and Arlo into my life. Riley gave him a look that was part exasperation, part amusement. Still the grand gesture man, I see. Some things don't change, he admitted. They found Arlo in the now empty atrium, sitting alone at one of the workstations, typing rapidly on his laptop. He looked up as they approached, his expression cautiously hopeful. You're both still alive, he observed. That's promising. We had a lot to discuss, Riley said, resting a hand on his shoulder. And still do. But we've made a start, Emerson added. A good one, I think. Arlo nodded, looking between them. So what happens now? It was the same question Emerson had asked Riley, and just as complex. What did happen now? How did they move forward from this moment, a billionaire CEO, a brilliant security consultant, and the extraordinary young man who connected them? Now, Emerson said carefully, we figure it out together. If that's what you want, Arlo. And what about the $10 million? Arlo asked, his expression unreadable. And the job offer? Both still stand, Emerson assured him. You earned them. Your solution was brilliant. But. He hesitated, they're not conditional on anything personal. Whether or not you want a relationship with me, the reward is yours. Arlo considered this. I don't need $10 million. No one needs $10 million, Riley said dryly. But you solved the problem. You saved the company. You earned it. What would you do with it? Emerson asked, genuinely curious. Arlo thought for a moment. Fund a scholarship program, maybe. For kids interested in ethical hacking and security research. Especially those who don't have access to traditional education paths. Pride swelled in Emerson's chest, pride for this thoughtful, generous young man who was his son. That's a wonderful idea. He gets that from his mother, Riley said softly. I certainly didn't teach him to hoard wealth. There was no bitterness in her tone, just a statement of fact. And she was right. Emerson had spent years accumulating wealth, building his empire, while Riley had focused on using her skills to help others, to make systems more secure for everyone, not just those who could afford it. I could learn from both of you, Arlo said, looking between them. The technical brilliance and business acumen from you, he nodded to Emerson, and the ethical framework and social responsibility from Mom. It was a diplomatic answer, but also a sincere one. Arlo wasn't choosing between them, he was acknowledging what each could offer him. I'd like that, Emerson said, emotion making his voice rough. I'd like that very much. Riley squeezed Arlo's shoulder. It's been a long day. We should get back to the hotel, get some rest. Where are you staying? Emerson asked. The Meridian, Riley replied. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough. Let me, would you? Emerson struggled to find the right words, not wanting to overstep but desperate to keep this connection now that he had found it. Would you both have dinner with me tonight? To celebrate Arlo's success, if nothing else. Riley and Arlo exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them, the kind that comes from 18 years of being each other's primary family. Dinner would be nice, Arlo said finally. But somewhere quiet. I've had enough attention for one day. I know just the place, Emerson said, relief washing through him. A small restaurant near my home. Private, excellent food, no press. As they made arrangements to meet later, Emerson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps had never truly experienced before. Not the satisfaction of a business success or the thrill of a technological breakthrough, but something deeper, more fundamental. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That night, in a quiet corner of a small, elegant restaurant, Emerson Vale sat across from the family he never knew he had. They talked for hours, about Arlo's childhood, about Riley's work, about the years that had passed without them knowing each other. There were awkward moments, painful truths, but also laughter, connection, the tentative formation of something new. As the evening drew to a close, Emerson walked them back to their hotel. At the entrance, Arlo surprised him with a brief but genuine hug. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "And for wanting to know me." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Emerson replied, his throat tight with emotion. Riley stood a few steps away, watching them with an expression Emerson couldn't quite read. When Arlo went inside, promising to see them both in the morning, Emerson turned to her. "Riley," he said softly. "I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But I want you to know, I'm grateful for this opportunity. To know Arlo. To reconnect with you, even if just as co-parents." She studied him in the soft light of the hotel entrance. "You've changed, Emerson. I'm not sure how much, or if it's enough. But you've changed. For the better, I hope," he said. "Time will tell," she replied, but her tone was gentle. "Good night, Emerson." As she turned to go, he called after her, "Riley." She paused, looking back. "I didn't know. But now that I do, please don't shut me out." Riley's expression softened slightly. "Emerson, don't make promises your ambition can't keep." "I won't," he said firmly. "Not this time." She nodded, acknowledging his words without fully accepting them. "One day at a time, Emerson. That's all any of us can do." As Riley disappeared into the hotel, Emerson stood alone on the sidewalk, the cool San Francisco night wrapping around him. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, messages from the board, from investors, from the press, all demanding his attention, his decisions, his leadership. For the first time in 19 years, he ignored them all. Instead, he looked up at the hotel where his son, his brilliant, remarkable son, was staying. Where Riley, the woman he had once loved and lost through his own choices, was giving him a second chance he didn't deserve but desperately wanted. Emerson Vale had built an empire of code and capital, had changed the way the world handled digital security, had amassed a fortune most could only dream of. But standing there in the quiet night, he realized a fundamental truth that had eluded him for decades. He didn't want to fix a system today. He wanted to fix them. His family. The connections he had severed through ambition and fear. That was the first step, not forgiveness, not reunion, but something new, a beginning. A truth finally spoken. A family slowly healing after 19 years of silence. The weeks following the Valkyrie Security Summit unfolded in ways Emerson could never have predicted. Professionally, the company rebounded stronger than ever. The transparent handling of the crisis, combined with the dramatic resolution, had actually enhanced Valkyrie's reputation. Clients who had been considering leaving returned. New contracts poured in. The stock reached an all-time high. But these successes, which would have been all-consuming to Emerson just months earlier, now felt secondary to the personal revolution happening in his life. Arlo had accepted the monetary reward but deferred on the job offer. "I need to finish my education first," he explained during one of their now regular dinners. "And I want to explore different aspects of security research before committing to one company, even yours." Emerson had been disappointed but proud of his son's independence. "A wise decision," he'd acknowledged. "Valkyrie will always have a place for you, but you should build your own path." True to his word, Arlo had established a scholarship foundation with the reward money, focusing on supporting underprivileged students interested in cybersecurity. He'd named it the Monroe Foundation, a choice that Emerson understood was deliberate. Arlo wasn't rejecting his newly discovered father, but he was honoring the parent who had been there for his entire life. Riley had returned to her consulting work in Seattle, but she and Arlo had extended their stay in San Francisco for 2 weeks after the summit. During that time, the three of them had begun the delicate process of getting to know each other, not as the people they had been 19 years ago, but as who they were now. They had established boundaries, expectations, rhythms. Emerson had cleared his schedule as much as possible, delegating responsibilities that once he would have insisted on handling personally. For the first time in his career, Valkyrie was not his top priority. When Riley and Arlo finally returned to Seattle, Emerson had felt their absence acutely. The penthouse that had always seemed appropriately minimalist now felt empty. The silence that had once been conducive to deep work now seemed oppressive. He found himself flying to Seattle almost every weekend, staying in a hotel near their home, spending time with Arlo and, when she was willing, with Riley. They showed him their city, their favorite places, the life they had built without him. It was humbling and illuminating, seeing the world his son had grown up in, so different from the privileged environment Emerson could have provided. Arlo had been raised in a modest but comfortable home, in a diverse neighborhood, with values centered on contribution rather than acquisition. "You did an amazing job with him," Emerson told Riley one evening as they watched Arlo chatting animatedly with a group of friends at a local cafe. "Better than I would have done." Riley had given him a measured look. "We'll never know that for sure. But I did my best." "More than your best," Emerson insisted. "You raised him to be thoughtful, ethical, brilliant, everything I would have wanted in a son, but with none of the coldness that might have come from me." "You're not cold, Emerson," Riley had said, surprising him. "Driven, yes. Focused, absolutely. But not cold. Never that." It was the first time since their reunion that she had defended him, even in this small way. It felt like a tiny crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an acknowledgement that perhaps he wasn't the villain in their story. Just a flawed man who had made a devastating choice. 3 months after the summit, Emerson made a decision that shocked the business world. He announced that he was stepping back from day-to-day operations at Valkyrie, taking the role of executive chairman while promoting Matthew Reeves to CEO. "The security breach taught us an important lesson," he told the board. "No system is perfect, and no leader should be irreplaceable. Valkyrie needs fresh perspectives, new approaches. Matthew has earned this opportunity." The real reason, which he shared only with Riley and Arlo, was simpler: "I've spent 19 years building a company. I'd like to spend the next 18 building relationships that matter more." Riley had been skeptical. "You're giving up control of Valkyrie? The company you sacrificed everything for?" "Not giving up," Emerson had corrected. "Evolving. Valkyrie will always be part of me, but it doesn't need to be all of me anymore." To demonstrate his commitment, Emerson purchased a small but elegant apartment in Seattle, not far from Riley and Arlo's home. He began splitting his time between San Francisco and Seattle, gradually shifting more of his focus to the latter. He established a research institute focused on ethical technology development, inviting Riley to serve as a technical advisor. She had hesitated, then accepted, acknowledging that their combined expertise could create something valuable. Working together again, even in this limited capacity, brought back echoes of their early days, the intellectual connection, the complementary approaches to problem solving. But now there was history between them, both painful and profound. "Do you ever wonder," Emerson asked her one evening as they reviewed proposals for the Institute, "what would have happened if I had made a different choice back then?" Riley considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. But wondering doesn't change what happened. We are where we are." "And where is that, exactly?" Emerson pressed gently. She met his gaze directly. "In a place I never expected to be. Co-parenting an adult son with a man I once loved and then learned to live without. Building something new that might actually matter. It's complicated." "Complicated is better than impossible," Emerson offered. "At least from my perspective." A small smile touched her lips. "Yes, I suppose it is." 6 months after the summit, Arlo received acceptance letters from several prestigious graduate programs in computer science and cybersecurity. He chose Stanford, close enough to Valkyrie for occasional collaboration, but independent enough to forge his own path. "Are you sure?" Riley had asked him. You don't have to choose Stanford just because it's near your father. I'm not, Arlo had assured her. I'm choosing it because it has the best program for what I want to study. The fact that it allows me to continue building a relationship with Emerson is a bonus, not the deciding factor. The day they helped Arlo move into his graduate housing, Emerson and Riley found themselves alone together, walking the Stanford campus after Arlo had shooed them away to meet his new roommates. He calls you Emerson, Riley observed. Not Dad. That's appropriate, Emerson replied. I haven't earned Dad yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Riley nodded, appreciating his understanding. You've changed more than I expected, she admitted. When Arlo first identified you as his father, I was terrified you'd try to buy his affection or overwhelm him with your Emerson-ness. He laughed at that. My Emerson-ness? Is that a scientific term? You know what I mean, Riley said, a smile playing at her lips. Your intensity. Your tendency to take over. Your largeness in any room. I've been trying to dial that down, he admitted. At least in personal settings. It's not easy. Old habits. I've noticed, Riley said. And I appreciate the effort. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the California sunshine warm on their shoulders. The campus was beautiful, historic buildings blending with modern architecture, students lounging on expansive lawns, the promise of knowledge and discovery in the air. This is what I wanted for him, Riley said softly. Opportunities. Choices. The chance to become whoever he wants to be. You gave him that, Emerson said. Long before I appeared in his life. Yes, she agreed. But now he has something else too. A connection to the other half of his story. That matters, Emerson. More than I sometimes want to admit. It was the most open she had been about the impact of his presence in Arlo's life, an acknowledgement that despite her initial reservations, she saw value in the relationship developing between father and son. Thank you, Emerson said simply. For allowing that connection. You could have shut it down. You had every right to. I considered it, Riley admitted. For about 5 minutes. But Arlo deserves to know you. And you. She hesitated, you deserve the chance to know him. As they reached the edge of campus, Emerson gathered his courage. Riley, would you have dinner with me tonight? Just the two of us. Not to discuss Arlo or the Research Institute or anything practical. Just, dinner. Riley looked at him, surprised. Are you asking me on a date, Emerson Vale? I suppose I am, he said, suddenly feeling as nervous as he had been 20 years ago, asking her to coffee for the first time. Is that completely inappropriate? She considered the question seriously. Not completely. Just, unexpected. Is that a yes? He pressed gently. It's a, I'll think about it, she replied, but her eyes held a warmth that gave him hope. That evening, Riley did join him for dinner, at a small, quiet restaurant near the campus. They agreed to a ground rule. No talking about Arlo, Valkyrie, or the past. Just two people, getting to know each other in the present. It was awkward at first. Their shared history loomed large despite their agreement to set it aside. But gradually, as the meal progressed, they found their rhythm. They discussed books they had read, places they had traveled, ideas that intrigued them. They discovered new common interests and surprising differences that hadn't existed when they were younger. You still take your coffee black, Riley observed when he ordered dessert. Some things never change. And you still tilt your head to the right when you're considering a complex idea, Emerson countered. I noticed it earlier when we were discussing quantum encryption. She smiled, caught off guard by his observation. I didn't realize I did that. You always have, he said softly. It's familiar. Nice. As the evening drew to a close, Emerson walked Riley back to her hotel. At the entrance, they paused, the moment heavy with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you for dinner," Riley said. "It was, surprisingly enjoyable." "Surprisingly?" Emerson raised an eyebrow. "You know what I mean," she said. "Given our history, a pleasant evening wasn't guaranteed." "No," he agreed. "But I'm glad we had it nonetheless." Riley studied him in the soft light of the hotel entrance. "What are you hoping for here, Emerson?" "With these dinners, the apartment in Seattle, all of it. What's your endgame?" It was a direct question, typical of Riley's straightforward approach. Emerson considered his answer carefully. "I don't have an endgame," he said honestly. "For most of my life, I've operated with clear objectives, strategic plans, defined outcomes. This is different. I'm not trying to achieve a specific result. I'm just trying." "Trying what?" she pressed. "Trying to be present. To be worthy of the second chance I've been given with Arlo. And with you, if that's even a possibility." Riley didn't respond immediately, weighing his words. "I can't make any promises," she finally said. "Too much has happened. We're different people now." "I know," Emerson acknowledged. "I'm not asking for promises. Just, possibilities." She nodded slowly. "Possibilities I can handle. Good night, Emerson." As she turned to enter the hotel, Emerson called after her, "Riley?" She paused, looking back. "I'd like to do this again sometime. If you would." A small smile touched her lips. "I think I would. Good night." It wasn't a declaration of feelings. It wasn't forgiveness for past wrongs. But it was an opening, a willingness to explore what might exist between them now, as the people they had become. As Emerson walked back to his own hotel, he reflected on the strange, winding path that had led him here. A security breach that had threatened to destroy everything he had built had instead revealed what he had been missing all along. A forgotten backdoor in a system had opened a new door in his life. The irony wasn't lost on him. For 19 years, he had built walls, digital fortresses designed to keep threats out, to protect what was valuable. But those same walls had kept him isolated, cut off from the connections that gave life meaning. Now, with Arlo in his life and Riley cautiously allowing him back into hers, Emerson was learning a different kind of security, not the rigid, impenetrable kind he had built his fortune on, but something more flexible, more human. The security that comes from authentic connection, from vulnerability, from being known. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult conversations ahead, boundaries to navigate, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in decades, Emerson Vale wasn't facing the future alone. If you've been touched by this story of reconnection and second chances, please take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that remind us it's never too late to find the backdoors to what truly matters in life. 1 year after the security summit that had changed everything, Emerson stood in his Seattle apartment, adjusting his tie in the mirror. The research institute he and Riley had established was hosting its first major conference on ethical technology development, and they were both scheduled to deliver the opening address. His phone buzzed with a text from Arlo, running late. Traffic from campus. Save me a seat. Emerson smiled as he replied, always. The relationship with his son had deepened over the past year. What had begun as cautious curiosity on both sides had evolved into genuine connection. They weren't quite at the easy familiarity that Arlo shared with Riley. 18 years couldn't be made up so quickly, but they had found their own rhythm, their own ways of relating. They collaborated on research projects, debated ethical approaches to security challenges, shared meals and conversations that ranged from deeply technical to surprisingly personal. Arlo still called him Emerson, not Dad, but the name had taken on a warmth, a familiarity that made it feel like more than just a formal address. The doorbell rang, interrupting Emerson's thoughts. He opened it to find Riley standing there, elegant in a simple blue dress, her curly hair swept up in a style that framed her face perfectly. "You're early," he said, pleasantly surprised. "Thought you might need help with your presentation," she replied, stepping inside. "You tend to get too technical for a general audience," says the woman who once spent 40 minutes explaining buffer overflow vulnerabilities to a group of marketing executives, he teased. Riley laughed, the sound still new enough in their interactions to make Emerson's heart lift. "Fair point. We're both terrible at simplifying. That's why we need each other for this presentation." Need each other. The phrase hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than its surface meaning. Their relationship had evolved too over the past year, from cautious co-parents to research partners to something more complex. They had dinner regularly now, sometimes with Arlo, sometimes just the two of them. They collaborated closely on the Research Institute, their complementary approaches creating something neither could have built alone. And 3 months ago, after a particularly successful project launch, Riley had kissed him. It had been brief, almost tentative, but it had cracked open a door they had both been circling for months. "We should talk about this," Emerson had said afterward. Probably, Riley had agreed. But not tonight. Tonight, let's just be. Since then, they had been navigating a delicate new territory, not quite a relationship in the conventional sense, but definitely more than friendship or professional collaboration. They were taking it slowly, both aware of the history between them, both cautious about risking the stability they had built for Arlo's sake. "Your tie is crooked," Riley observed now, stepping closer to adjust it. Her fingers brushed against his collar, a casual touch that nonetheless sent warmth through him. "Thank you," he said, resisting the urge to catch her hand in his. "For the tie. And for agreeing to co-present today. Your perspective balances mine." "Always has," she replied with a small smile. "Even when we were young and coding until dawn, you saw patterns and I saw exceptions. You built walls and I found the doors that needed closing. Or opening," Emerson added softly. Riley's eyes met his, understanding the reference. "Sometimes both. Closing old doors, opening new ones." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken meaning. Then Riley stepped back, professional mode engaging. "We should go over the key points one more time," she said, moving toward the living room where their presentation materials were spread out. "I want to make sure we're aligned on the ethical framework section." Emerson followed, accepting the shift in focus. This was how they operated now, moments of personal connection interspersed with professional collaboration, neither pushing too hard or too fast towards something that might not be ready to fully form. As they reviewed their presentation, Emerson found himself watching Riley more than the slides, the way she gestured when making an important point, the slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated, the passion in her voice when discussing the ethical implications of emerging technologies. "You're staring," she noted without looking up from her notes. "Observing," he corrected. "There's a difference." "And what are you observing?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze. "How remarkable you are," he said simply. "How fortunate I am to have this second chance." Riley's expression softened. "Emerson." His phone buzzed again, interrupting whatever she had been about to say. A message from the Institute's event coordinator, auditorium filling up. "ETA. We should go," Emerson said, gathering their materials. "Duty calls." Riley nodded, the moment passing but not forgotten. As they headed for the door, she paused, her hand on his arm. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I'm glad for this second chance too. For Arlo's sake, primarily. But not only for his. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. But from Riley, practical, measured Riley who had spent 18 years protecting her heart from the man who had once broken it, it was significant. The conference was a success by any measure. The auditorium was filled to capacity with technology leaders, ethicists, policymakers, and students. Emerson and Riley's joint presentation on Building Security with Humanity in Mind received a standing ovation. Arlo, arriving just in time to claim his reserved seat in the front row, had watched his parents with evident pride. Afterward, as they mingled with attendees during the reception, Emerson found himself repeatedly drawn back to Riley's side, as if by some invisible force. They worked the room as a unit, complementing each other's points, building on each other's ideas, presenting a united front that felt both professional and deeply personal. "You two are quite the team," observed a senior government official who had attended their presentation. The technical brilliance and business acumen, she nodded to Emerson, combined with the ethical framework and human-centered approach, she smiled at Riley. "It's a powerful combination." "We balance each other," Riley acknowledged. "Always have. Though it took us a while to recognize the value in that balance," Emerson added. As the reception wound down and the crowd thinned, Arlo approached them, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That was impressive," he said. "The way you two presented together, it was like watching two parts of a system working in perfect synchronization." High praise from a systems thinker, Emerson noted with a smile. "I mean it," Arlo insisted. "You complement each other. It's nice to see." There was something in his tone that caught both their attention, a hint of something beyond simple approval of their professional collaboration. "Arlo?" Riley questioned. "What are you thinking?" He hesitated, then spoke with the directness they had both come to expect from him. "I'm thinking that I wouldn't be opposed to you two exploring, whatever it is that's happening between you." Emerson and Riley exchanged surprised glances. "What makes you think something's happening?" Riley asked carefully. Arlo gave her a look that was pure Riley, skeptical, penetrating, seeing through pretense. "Mom, I'm a pattern recognition specialist. And I've spent the last year observing you two. The way you gravitate toward each other in a room. The way you finish each other's technical thoughts. The way you both check your phones whenever one of you is running late. That's just professional courtesy," Emerson attempted, though he knew the excuse was thin. "Sure," Arlo said, not buying it for a second. "All I'm saying is, I'm an adult. You don't need to tiptoe around for my sake. If there's something there, you should explore it. Life's too short for unnecessary firewalls." With that, he excused himself to speak with one of his professors, leaving Emerson and Riley standing together, slightly stunned by their son's perceptiveness and directness. "He gets that from you," Emerson said after a moment. "The ability to see what others miss. And the bluntness is all you," Riley countered, but she was smiling. They were quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications of Arlo's words. The permission he had granted them, not that they needed it, exactly, but the acknowledgement that their happiness mattered to him, that he wouldn't feel threatened by a relationship between them, was significant. "Would you like to have dinner?" Emerson asked suddenly. Later that evening, in a small, intimate restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, Emerson and Riley sat across from each other, the Seattle skyline glittering behind them. "Arlo was right," Riley said as they finished their meal. "We have been tiptoeing around this, whatever this is between us." "What would you call it?" Emerson asked. Riley considered the question. "Complicated. Unexpected. Potentially significant. All accurate descriptors," Emerson agreed. "But not quite what I was asking." "What were you asking, then?" "Whether you think there's a future here," he said directly. "For us. Beyond co-parenting Arlo. Beyond the research institute. Just us." Riley took a sip of her wine, gathering her thoughts. "A year ago, I would have said no without hesitation. 6 months ago, I would have said maybe, but probably not. Now." She met his gaze steadily. "Now I think there might be." "What changed?" Emerson asked, though he thought he knew. "You did," she said simply. "Or rather, I saw that you had." The Emerson I knew 18 years ago would never have stepped back from Valkyrie, never have prioritized relationships over achievement, never have had the patience to build a connection with Arlo without trying to control or direct it. I had good motivation to change, Emerson said softly. The chance to know my son. The possibility of reconnecting with you. Riley reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture that felt both new and familiar. I've changed too, she acknowledged. I'm not as guarded as I was. Not as afraid of being hurt again. I won't hurt you again, Emerson promised. Not intentionally. Not ever. I believe you, Riley said, and the simple statement carried the weight of forgiveness, of trust cautiously rebuilt. But Emerson, we need to be realistic. We're not 20-something coders falling in love in a lab anymore. We're established professionals with complex lives. We're co-parents to an adult son. We have history, good and bad. All true, Emerson acknowledged. But maybe that's an advantage, not an obstacle. We know ourselves better now. We understand what matters. Riley smiled slightly. And what matters to you now, Emerson Vale? What does the billionaire security architect want that he doesn't already have? The question was teasing but genuine. Emerson considered it seriously. Connection, he said finally. Authentic connection. With Arlo. With you, if you're willing. The kind of connection that can't be measured in stock prices or market share. That's quite a shift from the man who once chose Valkyrie over everything else, Riley observed. It took me 19 years and a catastrophic system failure to realize what I'd given up, Emerson admitted. I'm a slow learner in some ways, but I get there eventually. Riley laughed softly. Not slow. Just, focused elsewhere. Your mind was always remarkable, Emerson. It just needed to expand its priorities. They fell into comfortable conversation after that, sharing stories from the years they'd been apart, filling in the gaps in each other's lives. As the evening progressed, the restaurant emptied around them, but neither seemed inclined to leave. Tell me about Arlo as a child, Emerson said, hungry for the details of his son's life that he had missed. What was he like? Riley's face softened with memory. Curious about everything. Constantly taking things apart to see how they worked, usually without permission. I once found him at 3 in the morning, surrounded by pieces of our microwave. He'd heard a strange noise from it and decided to debug the problem. Did he fix it? Emerson asked, smiling at the image. Actually, yes, Riley admitted. That was the infuriating part. He'd not only identified the issue but improved the wiring configuration. The microwave worked better afterward. That sounds familiar, Emerson said. I did something similar with my father's radio when I was 7. Except I couldn't put it back together properly. He was less than pleased. Arlo mentioned you don't talk much about your parents, Riley said carefully. Emerson shrugged. Not much to say. My father was brilliant but cold. Success was the only acceptable outcome. My mother was absent, mostly. Physically present but emotionally distant. Is that why you were so driven? Riley asked. To prove yourself to them? Partly, Emerson acknowledged. But also because I genuinely loved the work. The challenge of building something secure, something unbreakable. The same thing that drew you to security research, I imagine. Riley nodded. The puzzle of it. The constant evolution. Though I was always more interested in the human element, how people interact with systems, where vulnerabilities emerge from that interaction. We complemented each other that way, Emerson said. I built the walls, you found the doors that needed closing. Or opening, Riley echoed his earlier words, a small smile playing at her lips. As the restaurant staff began their closing routine, Emerson reluctantly signaled for the check. I've kept you too late, he apologized. I'm a grown woman, Emerson. I decide how late I stay out, Riley replied with amusement. But yes, we should probably go. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Outside, the Seattle night was cool and clear, the water of Elliott Bay reflecting the city lights. Emerson offered Riley his jacket, which she accepted with a nod of thanks. "I'll walk you home," he said. "If that's all right." "I'd like that," she replied. They strolled along the waterfront, their conversation flowing easily now, the initial awkwardness of the evening long dissipated. When they reached Riley's building, they paused, the moment heavy with possibility. "Thank you for dinner," Riley said, slipping off his jacket and returning it. "And for the conversation." "Thank you for saying yes," Emerson replied. "Finally." She smiled at that. "I needed time, Emerson." "To be sure." "And are you?" "Sure." Riley considered the question. "I'm sure that I enjoy your company. That I respect the man you've become. That there's still something between us worth exploring." She paused. "But I'm also sure that we need to move carefully. For Arlo's sake, and for our own." "I can do careful," Emerson assured her. "I've learned patience these past months." "Have you?" Riley raised an eyebrow, skeptical but teasing. In answer, Emerson simply leaned forward and kissed her, gently, briefly, a question more than a demand. When he pulled back, Riley's expression was thoughtful. "That was nice," she said softly. "Just nice?" Emerson asked, a hint of his old confidence returning. Riley laughed. "Don't push your luck, Vale. Nice is a good start." "I'll take it," he said, smiling. "Good night, Riley." "Good night, Emerson." As he walked back to his apartment, Emerson felt lighter than he had in years. There were no guarantees, no certainties about where this rekindled connection with Riley might lead. But for the first time in his adult life, he was embracing that uncertainty rather than trying to control it. The next morning, Emerson woke to a text from Arlo, "Breakfast? I'm near your place." 20 minutes later, they were seated at a small cafe near Emerson's apartment, sharing coffee and conversation. Arlo seemed unusually contemplative, stirring his coffee absently while gathering his thoughts. "Everything okay?" Emerson asked. "Yeah," Arlo assured him. "Just processing some things. Anything you want to talk about?" Arlo looked up, his expression serious. "I saw you and Mom last night. Walking along the waterfront." Emerson felt a momentary panic. Had Arlo witnessed their kiss? Despite his son's stated approval of their exploring a relationship, actually seeing it might be different. "I wasn't spying," Arlo clarified quickly. "I was coming back from the library and happened to see you. You looked happy. Both of you." "We are," Emerson said carefully. "At least, I think we are. We're figuring things out." Arlo nodded. "Good. That's good." He paused. "It's strange, you know. For 18 years, it was just Mom and me. Now there's this new configuration. The three of us. A family, but not in the traditional sense. Does that bother you?" Emerson asked, genuinely concerned. "No," Arlo said thoughtfully. "It's just different. I'm still adjusting to having a father after all these years. And now potentially having parents who are, whatever you and Mom are becoming. We're taking it slowly," Emerson assured him. "Neither of us wants to disrupt the balance we've all found." "I know," Arlo said. "And I meant what I said yesterday. I want you both to be happy. You deserve that." The simple statement, delivered with such sincerity, touched Emerson deeply. "Thank you, Arlo. That means more than you know." They finished their breakfast, conversation shifting to Arlo's research and upcoming projects at the Institute. As they were preparing to leave, Arlo hesitated, then asked, "Do you regret it? The choice you made back then?" Emerson knew immediately what he was referring to. Yes, he said without hesitation. I regret not knowing you were coming into the world. I regret missing your childhood, your first steps, your first lines of code. I regret hurting your mother. He paused, then continued more thoughtfully. But I've learned that regret is only useful if it teaches you something. And what those regrets taught me is to value what I have now, the chance to know you, to rebuild something with Riley, to be part of this unconventional family we're creating. Arlo absorbed this, nodding slowly. That's a good perspective. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Arlo surprised Emerson with a brief but genuine hug. See you at the institute later, he said casually, as if the gesture hadn't been significant. But it was significant. Every step toward closeness, every moment of connection was a gift Emerson had never expected to receive. Over the next few months, a new pattern emerged in their lives. Emerson and Riley continued their careful exploration of rekindled feelings, building a relationship that honored their past while creating something new. Arlo flourished in his graduate studies, occasionally collaborating with both parents on research projects that combined their various strengths. They became, in their own unique way, a family, not defined by traditional structures or expectations, but by the connections they were choosing to nurture. 6 months after their first real date, Emerson and Riley stood together on the balcony of his Seattle apartment, watching a spectacular sunset over the Sound. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him, a posture of intimacy that had become natural over time. I've been thinking, Emerson said quietly. Dangerous, Riley teased. About us, he continued. About the future. Riley turned to face him, her expression curious but not alarmed. What about it? I love you, Riley, Emerson said simply. I think I always have, even during those 19 years apart. And while I know we're still finding our way, still building something new, I want you to know that I'm all in. Whatever form this takes, whatever pace we move at, I'm committed to us. Riley studied him, her gaze as penetrating as ever. Are you proposing, Emerson Vale? Not exactly, he said with a small smile. I know we're not there yet. Maybe we never will be, in the traditional sense. But I am proposing commitment. Intention. A future we build together, whatever shape it takes. Riley was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Then she reached up, touching his face gently. I love you too, she said softly. Despite everything. Despite the past. Or maybe because of it, because we've both grown into people who can truly see and appreciate each other now. It wasn't a conventional declaration of forever. It wasn't a promise of happily ever after. But for two people who had spent decades apart, who had found their way back to each other through an unlikely series of events, it was perfect, honest, measured, real. As they stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon, Emerson reflected on the strange, winding path that had led them here. A security breach that had threatened to destroy everything he had built had instead revealed what truly mattered. A forgotten backdoor in a system had opened a new door in his life. And his son. The brilliant young man who had inherited both his father's gift for seeing vulnerabilities and his mother's commitment to ethical technology, had not only saved Emerson's company but had given him the chance to become something more than just a successful CEO. To become a father. A partner. A man who understood that the most valuable connections couldn't be measured in code or capital. The future wasn't certain. There would be challenges, adjustments, moments of doubt. But for the first time in his life, Emerson Vale wasn't trying to control every variable or predict every outcome. He was simply present, grateful for the second chance he had been given, committed to making the most of it. Some doors, once opened, change everything. Thank you for joining us on this journey of reconnection and redemption. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more tales that remind us it's never too late to find the back doors to what truly matters in life. Your support means everything, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon.